Hello and welcome to PressTV News Analysis. I'm Kavit Afwayi. The United Nations Human Rights Council is to discuss Bahrain's rights record in the upcoming session of its Universal Periodic Review. That's called the UPR Working Group in Geneva. But what has the UN done in the past year to help Bahrainis? What about the first review, which discussed Bahrain back in the year 2008? Will this review prevent the ongoing abuses, which include human rights violation by Bahrain and its Saudi-backed forces? The Persian Gulf island of Bahrain, in depth in this edition of the News Analysis.
Bahrain's Universal Periodic Review by the Human Rights Council will tackle the persistent human rights crisis in the country and make recommendations that would address core human rights issues there. The UK-founded Bahraini kingdom has been suppressing large anti-regime protests since mid-February 2011. People demand the downfall of the Ali Khalifa monarchy. Saudi Arabia, a longtime ally of the Ali Khalifa regime, sent troops to help Manama put down popular protests. Since then, scores of people have been killed and many more wounded. Thousands have been arrested and tortured. Activists and human rights organizations call it a persistent human rights crisis.
Every kind of violation has happened, and it is our hope that this time the world will give a listening ear to the grievances of the Bahrainis. And if they don't do that, then that will be a disaster not only for the Bahrainis, but also for the concepts of the human rights and for the international standing on human rights.
For the umpteenth time, the Bahraini regime has been accused of serious rights violations. Even a commission established by the monarch himself has admitted to the regime's cruelty.
Violent beatings, punching, as well as electric shocks, sleep deprivation, verbal abuse, threats of rape and insults to religious faith. In general, these acts come under the definition of torture according to Anti-Torture Convention.
To add insult to injury, the US and the UK have given the Manama regime their all-out support.
There's been a report, a public relations report, which was put out, and the King then said that they would start improving things. Things have got worse since that report was issued. My own government claims it is talking to the Bahraini government. The truth of the matter is, my government is supporting the killer caliphs of Bahrain, so is the Israeli government, and so is the USA government.
Let me introduce our guest for this edition of the News Analysis. From London, we have Saeed Shaabi from the Bahrain Freedom Movement. From Madison, James Fetzer, who's a philosopher and political commentator. And from Beirut, Kamal Wazni, who's a political analyst. Gentlemen, welcome. Saeed Shaabi, let me first go to you. The UN Human Rights Council is going to be starting this review of the situation in Bahrain, this revolution. It did that in 2008, called the UPR, but there have been no results. Any hopes for this review to make a difference?
Unfortunately, the Human Rights Council is a collection of governments, and because of the situation of morality, ethics, disrespect to human rights, selfishness and interests, this council has become a club of human rights abusers. So they would like to stand with each other. They don't want to abandon each other at their hours of need. And this is why when they meet on Monday to discuss the UPR, the Universal Periodic Review of Bahrain, we do not expect many countries to stand up and challenge the regime of the Al Khalifa, who have committed numerous, huge and outrageous human rights over the past, not only over the past year, but it has been continuing the use of torture, arbitrary detention, extrajudicial killing, and all sorts of other abuse and ill treatment of people for years. But of course, it has intensified in recent years and in recent months and in recent days. In fact, only 3 days ago, Al Jazeera put out a report about the torture of Yusuf al-Mawali, whose body was dumped back in February in the sea, and they said he was drowned. But then the family brought experts from Turkey who have established beyond any reasonable doubt that he had been electrocuted before being dumped alive in the sea, to show that he had drowned. So the torture has been continuing, although the Bassiouni report said that and put recommendations that it should stop. And despite the fact that the regime has repeatedly claimed that it has rectified its practices and its policies, and does not engage in torture. Torture until today, until last night, and ill treatment of prisoners is still continuing until today, until tomorrow, because the regime cannot survive without ill treatment of people.
Kamal Basni, then, we're looking at the United Nations Human Rights Office, and it's supposed to see that countries who are members of it abide by UN human rights laws. Now, they have voiced concern over the excessive use of force against the protesters in Bahrain. It has included tear gas and rubber bullets. Brings us to what has occurred recently, and that's the United States resuming arms sales to Bahrain. How does that even fit in with human rights, with the U.S. being a member?
Well, obviously, we have to look at the United States, what it did from the beginning of the revolution in Bahrain, the revolution that asked for civil rights movement, where people asking for maybe equal rights in their own countries, where there's a widespread discrimination against the people, and there's large people of been segregated and not given the opportunity. The United States is actually siding with the government of Al Khalifa at the expense of the large population, because their interest, economic interest and political interest and military interest is with the Al Khalifa family. They have no regard whatsoever for the people of Bahrain or their voice, democratic voice or civil rights voice that is actually been supposed to be honored by the United States, which always claim it's trying to spread democracy around the world. But here there's a case where it's very much the people of Bahrain wanted their own democratic system to take place. But Mrs. Clinton, as we see, is selling weapon, and Obama, the civil rights activist, the Nobel Prize recipient, is actually encouraging the Bahraini to continue the crackdown. And he said, hey, this is a weapon and this is a way to do it. So this is a body where we have to look at it very carefully, but we have to give them some opportunity for the human rights. Maybe there is some maybe honest voice on that body, and they should look very carefully at what is taking place in Bahrain, because we have to look at the committee that was established by Al Khalifa, and they found him guilty because they found him that he violated a lot of laws, international laws, human rights laws, and the committee that he established, Al Khalifa, found him that he is actually guilty of a human rights violation and probably come to a crime against humanity. So if his own committee found him guilty, so I think they have no reason whatsoever for the UN Civil Rights Committee to find him also and raise the voice that he is guilty, and they should, the world, the free world, should give the Bahraini people the voice to actually have their freedom, and they have their aspiration and have their hopes, because these are determined people, wanted to have a free and honorable life, despite whether the American like it or don't like it, whether they like to have the American, the Fifth Fleet or not. It's not about America, it's the people of Bahrain. Right. They voice their voice clearly and should be heard.
Well, when it comes to arms sales from the United States, James Fetzer, isn't that illegal to sell to regimes that violate human rights? I mean, the Leahy law prohibits this. It's called aid to foreign governments, and that includes arms sales. So shouldn't the UN, in a sense, be after the U.S., given that the U.S. has this law in its own country?
Well, I think that's an excellent point. The fact is that hypocrisy is rampant in the United States, and its position and attitude toward the world. We espouse freedom and democracy, but in fact we have overthrown democratic governments in Iran, democratic governments in Chile. We have supported movements involving brutality in Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua. And the fact is that the use of NATO to depose regimes in Libya, and now with the massing of forces in Jordan threatening Syria, is a complete disgrace. The United Nations Declaration of Human Rights would have us treat every human being as intrinsically valuable in and of themselves and entitled to due process, no deprivation of life, liberty, or property without undergoing an appropriate judicial process. That, of course, is not what is going on here. Bahrain is being quite brutal to its protesters. We have the case mentioned already of the young man pulled from the ocean who had been electrocuted. The Saudis are sending forces into Bahrain. Ironically, while there is discussion of a merger between Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, the protest movement in Bahrain appears to be quite vital and robust, and therefore may potentially cause problems for the Saudi regime were such a move to take place.
Right. We're going to talk about that in a second. Said Al-Shaabi, I'm looking at some of the advanced questions that countries submitted to this periodic review, the UPR. Countries such as Denmark, will the government of Bahrain ensure the trials of the 21 political and human rights prisoners, which includes Abdulhadi al-Khawaja, be fair? Or Germany referring to the Bassiouni Commission. And it was interesting that when I looked down at the United Kingdom, it says, we would be grateful, and I'm quoting, for information on the extent to which civil society in Bahrain was consulted. Why would that be high on the list of the United Kingdom instead of maybe all these other abuses that are taking place, and for them to show concern towards that? They have cited that below this first question that they had.
Unfortunately, both the United States and the UK have supported the regime unreservedly. And they have not hidden that support. Until today, they have only, in extreme circumstances, said that we are concerned. That's the only word that would come from Washington or from London with regards to abuses of human rights. They have rarely said that we condemn or we reject or we refuse or we will take action about the regime of Bahrain's actions. So this is one thing. The other problem is that both countries, both Washington and London, have not only given the regime of the Al Khalifa moral and political support, but and of course military support, but they have also sent their police to support the regime and to repress our people. Since John Timoney, the worst cop in America according to the New Miami Times in 2007, arrived in Bahrain, and John Yates, who is involved in the scandal of phone hacking in the UK, the former deputy commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, since they went to Bahrain 6 months ago, the situation has become worse in terms of human rights, in terms of repression, in terms of number of deaths. At least 45 people have died since they arrived in Bahrain, since they set foot on our land.